In September 1939, with the invasion of Polish territory, Nazi Germany began World War II, demonstrating its new dominance in terms of destructive power. In the early battles, the German side achieved unprecedented victories in record time, bringing the entire continent to its knees. Under the tracks of their tanks and the boots of their soldiers lay the bodies of thousands of victims and adversaries who could not stop the advance. Beyond the final outcome, it is crucial to consider this conflict from the perspectives of all sides. By viewing the combat through National Socialist eyes, we can understand their tactics, their logic, and what motivated Hitler's troops. That is why, in this installment of military history, we propose analyzing three of the most important battles. Get ready to examine the invasion of Poland, the bombing of London, and the conquest of France from the perspective of the Third Reich. The Hitlerian offensive began almost in secret, with an operation that the world only learned about several years later. On August 31, 1939, a small group of German agents dressed in Polish uniforms, led by Alfred Naujoks, stormed a radio station in the city of Gleiwitz, which was then under Reich control. From there, they broadcast an anti-German message, a kind of threat against Adolf Hitler's government. To make the action more credible, Reich soldiers used Polish prisoners who had already been accused of political violence. They were blamed for the incident and executed the following day. With this fake attack, Nazi propaganda accused Poland of persecuting the ethnic Germans living in its territory.
Poland, September 1939. The German foe begins its ruthless march of conquest and sets the stage for World War II. Poland's 34 million inhabitants, crushed, scattered, and enslaved. Tens of thousands of square miles of territory shrink before the movement of lightning armored columns. Poland and the world learn the meaning of a grim new word: blitzkrieg.
The Germans firmly believed in the theory of living space, or Lebensraum, created by the geographer Friedrich NAZl. It involved the annexation of German-speaking territories located in other countries, with the ultimate goal of achieving the perfect development of a Germanic nation. Hitler combined part of this idea with his peculiar racist conceptions, which in turn had a social and cultural background. The conquest of this living space guided the Führer's efforts to give his particular meaning to the war that would erupt in September 1939, already with a fraudulent excuse in hand to enter Poland. For some time, Hitler's men had been stationed at the border, with thousands of troops and pieces of artillery arriving daily. It was evident that something was being prepared on an unprecedented scale in the region. As a precaution, the Poles had set up explosive charges at the most significant German-Polish border crossings in East Prussia, primarily along the Vistula River, at the Dachau bridges. These charges could be detonated at any moment via a long cable first laid across the bridges and then along the embankment of the right bank to small huts near the station where the command was located. At exactly 4:26 a.m. on September 1, 1939, German Captain Bruno Dilly, commanding a squadron of the Luftwaffe, was tasked with preventing the demolition of these routes. To this end, with a force composed of 3 Junkers Ju-87 bombers, he dropped the necessary bombs to cut the detonator cable. This action prevented the destruction that would have impeded the advance of an armored convoy full of German soldiers and artillery pieces ready to participate in the invasion. However, in a dramatic turn of events, Polish engineers managed to reconnect the detonator cables, and the structures finally exploded at 6:30 a.m. Despite this, the invasion was already underway.
With little to stand in their way, the Nazi divisions roar across the Polish countryside and reveal for the first time the machines and weapons that are to terrorize a freedom-loving people. Military observers see the Nazi lightning warfare as setting the style for modern battle.
Docked in the port of Danzig since August 25 was the battleship Schleswig-Holstein, a training ship of the German Navy that had arrived on a supposed goodwill diplomatic visit. However, it was the Trojan horse. Inside, a landing force of 225 sailors was ready to attack. On the early morning of September 1st, they fired their 4 200mm artillery pieces, along with the 5 150mm guns on the port side, against the fortress of the Westerplatte Peninsula. The German invasion was spectacular, with all 3 branches going on the offensive simultaneously: the Luftwaffe, its air power; the Heer, the infantry; and the Kriegsmarine, the navy. The Luftwaffe attacked the naval base at Puck, destroying the detachment and killing the commander, the first naval officer to fall in World War II. At 14:01 hours, the base at Gdynia was bombed by Stukas, sinking a torpedo boat and damaging 3 other vessels. The Polish forces were overwhelmed and unable to contain the deadly advance. The Luftwaffe developed the tactic of attacking Polish military airfields, but this plan proved effective only during the first days of the campaign. This was because the Polish Air Force had anti-aircraft defenses to prevent many of the German bombings from hitting tactically important targets. The eventual German air superiority resulted from the higher quality of their aircraft, as well as their numerical superiority. The Third Reich's infantry had a very tough job, as their Polish counterparts were prepared to die rather than surrender their land. This was exemplified in the famous Battle of Wisna, also known as the Polish Thermopylae. A small force of just a battalion and 3 companies held out for 3 days in a fortified area near the city of Łomża. However, their effort only served to delay the inevitable outcome. The Polish units were virtually annihilated.
They're entrenched in the city's post office and under repeated fire of Nazi-trained militiamen. Taking cover behind an advancing tank, the attackers move in. Gasoline is sprayed on the building, and its doom is sealed.
The Germans faced a difficult task in subduing Warsaw, the capital of Poland. Their strategy primarily involved a long and painful siege that lasted from September 8th to September 28th, with intermittent battles using motorized columns and tanks. As the Reich's Air Force joined the offensive against the capital, local defenses were significantly weakened. Approximately 18,000 civilians died in Warsaw during the siege. Finally, on September 28th, the few surviving soldiers surrendered, and Germany achieved its first conquest in Europe. Hitler's soldiers emerged victorious, and the promises of glory from their leader had been fulfilled. They also observed how their military equipment and tactical training were superior to that of the enemy. For those minds, the wild theories of racial superiority seemed to hold some truth. The gears of the global conflict had been set in motion as, fulfilling their promise to the Polish government, Britain and France declared war on the Germans. The occupation of Poland marked a sharp decline in the living standards of its citizens, especially for those who were Jewish. In October 1939, Germany directly annexed the former Polish territories along its eastern border: West Prussia, Poznan, Upper Silesia, and the former Free City of Danzig. In the rest of the occupied country, including the cities of Warsaw, Kraków, Radom, and Lublin, the so-called general government was established under the leadership of the National Socialist Party lawyer Hans Frank. Once the Polish territory was under control, it was time for the Nazis to set their sights on another target, one that was much more challenging but enticing: the United Kingdom. Germany launched an attack on one of its great mortal enemies in the best way it knew how, with a massive and imposing air campaign.
The Germans dropped bombs on British shipping convoys and strategic sites along the coast. For many British people, this was their first glimpse of the planes they'd feared for so long.
The first attack was carried out by several squadrons of the Luftwaffe, targeting naval objectives south of England and convoys of cargo ships operating in the English Channel. The Germans named it Adlerangriff, or Eagle Attack, and from that moment on, such operations became a daily occurrence. Between September 7, 1940 and May 21, 1941, 16 British cities were attacked with at least 100 tons of explosives. Over a period of 267 days, London was bombed on 71 occasions. Birmingham, Liverpool, and Plymouth were hit 8 times each, Bristol 6 times, Glasgow 5 times, Southampton 4 times, Portsmouth and Hull 3 times each, and at least one heavy attack occurred in 8 other communities. The city that bore the brunt was London, bombarded by the Luftwaffe for 57 consecutive nights. Over 1 million homes were destroyed, and it is estimated that 20,000 civilians lost their lives. The ports and industrial centers of the city also received attacks. German pilots flew over the English capital daily. For many, it was their first glimpse of foreign lands in their lives. Imagine being a Luftwaffe soldier who had never left his province. Suddenly, you're aboard a powerful Stuka, dropping explosive materials on the beautiful city of London. It must have been an incredible experience for the National Socialist personnel.
Preceded by a shower of flares, German bombers rained fire and high explosive bombs in their most savage attack on London. Here again is the blood, the sweat and tears that Nazi warfare brings to the men, women and children of city, town and village.
Within the operation, perhaps the most incredible and effective offensive was on September 15, 1940, when a total of 2,119 bombings were recorded. Nazi planes dropped hundreds of tons of bombs on various strategic and economic targets, always aiming to pave the way for a naval and land invasion. This continued until the 24th of that month, when, perhaps due to bad weather, the squadrons intended to bomb the Thames estuary veered off course and ended up dropping their payload on several London neighborhoods, causing numerous civilian casualties and significant damage. Once again, German superiority in the air was complete. The Luftwaffe, commanded by Göring, the second-in-command of the regime and a personal friend of Hitler, had over 3,000 aircraft. This included fighters, bombers, Coast Guard planes, and reconnaissance aircraft of types such as Junkers, Stuka, Fokker, and Dornier. The Royal Air Force, under the command of General Hugh Dowding, had barely a third of this deployment, consisting of Spitfires and Hurricanes. In practice, German superiority was even greater due to their experienced pilots. However, the bombings did not manage to demoralize the British or force them into surrender, nor did they cause significant damage to the war economy. As incredible as it may sound, the 8 months of bombing never hindered British production, and war industries continued to operate and expand. Various reasons have been proposed to explain the limited effectiveness of the German offensive. The Oberkommando der Luftwaffe did not develop a strategy for destroying British industries. Instead of maintaining pressure on a specific industry, it frequently shifted from one type to another. Additionally, the Luftwaffe did not have the proper equipment to carry out strategic bombing that could cripple the enemy's industry. Still, the attacks on the United Kingdom demonstrated that Hitler had no qualms about facing other powers head-on. If the invasion of Poland was a point of pride for the German soldier, The occupation of France was even more so. In record time, the Third Reich managed to plant its flag in a historic European power that had been the main military reference on the continent, thus demonstrating that they were the new hegemonic force. The takeover of French territory was even faster than that of Polish soil. This was due to the effectiveness of blitzkrieg at its maximum expression, coupled with a marked cowardice on the part of local high commands who fled, handing the country over to Nazism on a silver platter. Soon, German flags with their eagles and standards flew over the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, and every square of the City of Lights. The French government had declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939, after the latter invaded Poland. That is why, at the beginning of September 1939, France launched the failed Saar offensive, sending a timid garrison of soldiers to contain the potential advance of Nazism. However, by mid-October, French troops had returned to their original positions. Germany opened fire on May 10, 1940, and in just 6 weeks, defeated the Allied forces and conquered French soil with unprecedented speed.
The two opposing armies were nearly equal in troop numbers and divisions. The French and British forces had nearly a 3-to-2 advantage in the number of tanks, and a 2-to-1 advantage in guns. However, the Germans had a significant advantage in the number of aircraft.
Following the famous Yellow Plan, or Fall Gelb to the letter, German armored units advanced unexpectedly through the Ardennes and along the Somme Valley, isolating and encircling the Allied units that had moved into Belgium to confront the anticipated invasion of that territory. When the British, Belgian, and French forces were pushed toward the sea by the well-organized German operation, the British Expeditionary Force and several French divisions were evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk to avoid their annihilation. This had an immeasurable impact on the German troops. In this deception, the Reich employed the classic tactics of the Prussian Empire, a battle of encirclement combined with the constant movement of artillery, mechanized infantry, and foot soldiers. The Imperial German past was still viable in the present. It was a sign that this lineage of superiority remained valid. Hitler's soldiers were inspired to dream of being part once again of a conquering power that would dominate Europe with an iron fist.
French tanks were better designs, more numerous and with superior armor and armament, but slower, and with inferior mechanical reliability than the German designs. The German army had equipped radios in all of its tanks, allowing for greater command control during battle. In comparison, just 80% of French tanks were equipped with radios.
On June 5, 1940, the German forces launched the next phase of their invasion, the Red Plan, or Fall Rot. The 60 French divisions mounted a tenacious resistance, but were overcome by the Reich's air superiority and armored mobility. Wehrmacht tanks flanked the defensive line and made enormous advances into French territory, occupying Paris without opposition on June 14, 1940. After the collapse of the army and the escape of the French government, German commanders met with French officials to negotiate the end of hostilities. Within a few days, both countries signed an armistice. The Vichy government, led by Marshal Philippe Pétain, became the legal successor to the Third French Republic, and Germany occupied all the northern and western coasts of France, as well as the interior of these areas. For the German soldiers, this was not only a new morale boost, but also allowed them to tour a conquered land. The Nazis enjoyed France as if it were their amusement park, organizing vacations for every member of the army. Many of the locals and businesses were left in the hands of the soldiers. Again, imagine that for years, you had been just a simple combatant, trained daily at a German base. Suddenly, from one day to the next, you find yourself a powerful conqueror in distant lands, enjoying your stay in one of the most architecturally beautiful nations in Europe. The conquest of France was not only strategically significant, but also symbolically important for the men of the Reich. From that moment on, they knew that any victory was possible and that no single power could defeat them alone. As you'll see, it's important to analyze the war even from the perspective of those considered the villains. For them, the global conflict began with overwhelming victories over enemies they believed to be superior. Keep in mind that in just a few months, they brought half of Europe to its knees, including powers like France. By putting these three battles into context, we gain a better understanding of the soldiers' reasoning and their motivations for fighting on behalf of the Reich. This brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this content and want us to continue analyzing World War II from various perspectives, we recommend that you follow us and activate the notifications for our channel. With that said, we bid you farewell until the next edition of Military History. Thank you for joining us.